All right, hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mercules. Welcome to episode 18 of the Massive Breakdown podcast. We are here on Tuesday night, going to be talking to you about the special meta today. We're going to be discussing First Light, last week's trials, how that went. Some people loved it, some people hated it. We'll get some opinions in here. If you remember last week, we also talked about the primary meta, how it compared to the special meta, but now we're going to dive a little bit more in depth into snipers, shotguns, sidearms, fusions, where they fit in the grand scheme of things. We're not going to be talking changes as much necessarily as we were last week. We're going to be focusing a lot more on the present state of the game. The shotgun meta, it's a thing right now. People are playing shotguns a lot. Shotguns aren't as powerful as they were back in the House of Wolves days. They're not as powerful as they were back in Vanilla days. In fact, shotguns are probably the weakest they've ever been compared to shotguns. The problem is, and we've discussed this before, all of the other guns are the weakest they've ever been, or close to it. Can't make blanket statements like that, but a lot of the other guns are very, very weak. So shotguns still reign supreme, even after all the nerfs they've gone through, even after all this stuff. But there are a couple of ways that you can move away from the shotgun meta if you would like to do that. They always say if you can't beat them, join them, but shotguns aren't unbeatable right now. They do still have their weaknesses. And surprisingly enough, lead PvP designer, I think his name is Derek Carroll, actually showed us a way that the Destiny designers themselves can help clear the meta of shotguns a little bit without even nerfing anything. And it was by putting us on a big map for trials, First Light. So it's something you don't see in the majority of Crucible playlists anymore. They took almost all the big maps out. Skyshock, Bastion, First Light. There aren't very many big maps anymore. They took them all out. But that is one thing that can be done if Bungie wants to kind of cut back on the shotgun usage a little bit without nerfing them. You can add some more big maps back in. I think, Kutch, do you have any stats for this weekend from the trials?
I have some excellent stats to back up that statement that you made. So first off, just for comparison, let's look back to Spooky Trials, the second weekend of Spooky Trials on Anomaly. So stats for that weekend, and obviously that's, as a reminder, that was on Anomaly, no radar, no revives. So just as far as what we're working with environment-wise, primary weapons made up 26.4% of kills. That's just, looking at the top 10, everything under that's pretty negligible. So right around 26.4% of all kills came from those top 10 primary weapons. For comparison, 29.2% of all kills came from the Matador. So, the previous weekend, Spooky Trials was hugely favoring shotguns, no question. It's there was no debate. Just I guess for reference, the top 10 special weapons that week totaled 52% of all kills. So most of those shotgun. So it was pretty crazy. This weekend, though, they changed it up. They recognized, hey, people are tired of getting killed by the Matador 64. All right. So First Light. First off, a surprising number of people got killed by Sparrows in trials, but more interestingly, we saw the Matador basically drop off the map as far as being a competitive weapon. And the top weapons for trials were Mida and the Clever Dragon, pretty unsurprisingly. Those two weapons combined totaled 26% of all kills. So that means that just those two weapons got as many kills as all of the top 10 primary weapons combined from the previous weekend. In total, primaries accounted for 42.3% of all kills this past trials on First Light. That's 42% just from those top 10 primary weapons. Specials only accounted for 34.8%. So switching to that big map did not make it 100% a sniper fest. Snipers definitely dominated on the special weapon slots, understandably. But we actually saw a lot more primary gunfights than pretty much any trials that I can remember. So big change. Map choice affects game balance just as much as the weapons themselves. So that's, I guess I'll leave it at that. Got some more stats for kind of a more regular trials map that I can throw out later on. But what are you guys' take on that map choice versus weapon balance?
Honestly, you did make very good points about the map choice. Both of you made good points about map choice affecting the weapon choice. We were talking about this earlier. I'm actually surprised. I'm very surprised that we didn't see more of the off-meta primaries kind of surface at this point. You're talking about Clever Dragon being the second highest used primary. I would have expected an entirely different archetype of pulse rifles, and actually the two, I guess, worst archetypes, speaking in PvP effectiveness, which would be the Nerwin's Mercy and the Spare Change archetype. I'd have expected more of these because, to be completely honest, the range on both of the lower impact archetypes is terrible. It's not enough to function on a map like First Light. So I'd have expected to see these PDX 41s, the Nerwins, the Parthian shot. They all have excellent base range that can be extended with the proper perk selection. And I really do think that if more people had tried them on First Light, we would have seen that they really were more effective on that map. Mercules, you mentioned, I believe that you're using a high impact scout on First Light.
I mean, I main a high impact scout, so it kind of just played right into my alley anyways, but I main the Chaos Dogma or the Cocytus. Those are my two, so obviously I'm not going to change it up for a map like that. I mean, hell, I main those on Anomaly, so I'm definitely going to use them on First Light, but I think the thing with the Clever Dragon is it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy at this point. Like, everyone thinks the Clever Dragon is the best, so everyone's playing with the Clever Dragon, so everyone pushes themselves into engagement distances that work well with the Clever Dragon, even on a map like First Light, which has much wider angles. Now obviously, if you use the shotgun on First Light, you'd be putting yourself at a tremendous disadvantage. But because everyone is so used to using the Clever Dragon, even on a map with bigger sightlines and more options, they still don't necessarily take advantage of them. They still kind of want to push themselves in a little bit more, and that's why that gun still did so well. People forget that there, like you said, are entire classes of weapons that have monstrous range stats and can kill very easily from very far away. But because you just never see them, people aren't used to them, people don't play with them, people don't pay attention to them, so when trials on First Light came, they just didn't really think about it. They'd much rather play a style they're used to, even on a map they're not used to necessarily. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's actually, I was thinking of something while you were talking. We were talking about the choice of map affecting the loadout, and I think what we saw this week was a very large percentage of the player base that went in and played trials didn't adjust accordingly. They went in with their standard loadouts, the loadouts that they'd use on, I guess, standard trials maps, the ones that have a lot more close quarters action. I guess it just reflects the mindset currently of sticking with that meta, even when that meta may not necessarily be advantageous at the time. They're meta for a reason. They are the best guns in the game, but the game that we're playing tends to lean towards close quarters. So when you get onto a larger map like First Light, like Bastion, you've got to adjust your definition of meta to match with the map that you're playing on.
And I think the teams that did that probably had the most success, honestly. They were playing to the map's advantages probably a lot more than some of the other teams out there.
So one thing I want to jump in and add as just kind of a point of interest, the number 3 primary weapon was actually the Jade Rabbit. Came in at just under 5% of all kills. So there was some adaptation. We actually saw a lot more scout rifles in the top 10 than is even remotely normal for trials. So, but kind of looking back to the special loadout, I thought it was really interesting. We saw a shift back to what I think was more common at one point, with sniper rifles being dominant, but it really swung strongly people did in the special weapon category. I think people really do take note of the map and swap out their specials. But like you said, people are not used to doing the same thing with a primary weapon. On the special side, 8 out of the top 10 special weapons chosen, as far as percentage of all kills in trials this past weekend, were sniper rifles. The only other 2 weapons on that list were the Matador 64 and the Party Crasher +1. And both of those guns did, maybe a quarter of the kills that they would normally be getting in trials, just looking back over the last several weeks. So, the people who continued to run those weapons suffered because of it, as they probably should.
And I'd say that changing from special to special makes sense because they have such niche roles that a shotgun doesn't make any sense at all. Not a lick of sense on a map like First Light. Whereas a Clever Dragon still, makes enough sense that it didn't really kick people in the butt enough to convince them to change. Even though the Parthian shot might make more sense, even though Cocytus might make more sense, the Clever Dragon is still a pulse rifle. It's still supposed to be a mid-range weapon, Using a shotgun on a map like First Light just doesn't make sense. And people are used to changing specials based on scenarios like that. They're used to seeing First Light pop up and switching to a sniper. But they're not necessarily used to seeing First Light pop up and saying, maybe I should take out my high-impact scout as opposed to my Mida. That's just, so it's two different mindsets looking at it right now.
So I've got a quick question for you, Kit. You said 8 out of the top 10 special weapons for this week of trials were sniper rifles.
Yep.
Just to satisfy my curiosity, how many of those are not in either the Black Spindle, Zen Meteor impact archetype, or the 1,000-yard stare archetype? Are all of them those high-impact snipers?
Well, let's take a quick look down the list here as far as the special meta for trials on First Light. We had 1,000-yard stare and longbow synthesis taken 1 and 2. So both those mid-high impact archetypes. We had Event Horizon at number 3 and that's the 37 impact, the same as the Black Spindle. Devil's Dawn was number 5 after the Matador. And again, that's, for those who don't know, that's the max impact, same as the Black Spindle. Winged Word, which is a 1,000-yard stare archetype, that mid-high impact. That's the Trial Sniper, if I remember correctly. Came after that. Then we had LDR 5001, another mid-high impact, but not forgotten, same. And Ex Machina, which is another max impact. That's the raid sniper, for those who don't know. And then the last weapon was Party Crasher, with only 1% of all kills. So no, I guess to answer your question, nobody was taking a non-high impact sniper into trials. They were all 1,000-yard stare, or I guess I would really call it the Event Horizon class, because I think that's probably a better choice than the Black Spindle. But
let me toot my own horn here a little bit, because we called this back when the sniper rifle nerf came out. I said the way that they nerfed sniper rifles was unnecessary, unneeded. It was a reaction to people calling for sniper changes to make it look like they did something, and I said it wasn't going to take anyone away from using the snipers that are popular. I straight up said that, because it wasn't. Because taking away the ability to super snipe was not going to stop people from playing what is still the best class of sniper overall. They still have high aim assist. They still, for the most part, have good inventory sizes. They still are the best all-around snipers. They can still two-tap body shot, and I know people say all the time, using a 1,000-yard stare and two-tapping isn't realistic. Well, it actually kind of is. It is not as fast as using something like the 7th Sense, I will admit that. It is not optimal, but you can do it. You can, and you have the ability to body shot and switch to a primary and finish them off. All right, so back when they made all those changes, I knew it wasn't going to actually stop people from using this class of sniper rifle. And that's why it bothered me that they took away the ability to snipe supers. Sniping supers made sense to me for that archetype. But the changes that they could have made that also would have made sense, like lowering the inventory size, like lowering the aim assist size, those things made sense to me too. They didn't do them. They didn't really give people a reason to run that many other classes.
Just to, I guess, to reference that for people, we are talking here about back in episode 10 when we discussed the weapon balance patch for 2.4, which was released quite a while ago now. I guess that was 2 months ago. Wow, we've been doing this for a little bit here. So that was September 8th is when that weapon tuning went live. And you absolutely did. People can go back and listen to it. I know we got a little bit of flack for being a little bit negative that episode, criticizing that weapon tuning. But we might have been a little bit over the top in expressing our feelings, but I don't think we were inaccurate in a lot of our points there. And this probably bears us out in that those sniper rifles are 100% the first choice.
If you look at a lot of those changes they made, can you name one thing they really changed that was super positive in the meta today? They changed flinch, and what did flinch do? Now flinch is one of the determining factors in which guns are the best in the meta. Now every single person was grinding for a Clever Dragon with high caliber rounds because of how powerful it is. Nobody wanted flinch to be changed on primaries, and now flinch is worse. They buffed auto rifles. It didn't change a single thing. Nobody even noticed.
I am really disappointed that we don't see more taking the usage, so I hope they buff that again. But no, to be completely serious, yeah, I can't remember anything that changed in 2.4 aside from bug fixes that
which are obvious.
Yeah, beyond that, I've got nothing. The meta didn't really change in 2.4. It basically stayed the same.
Speaking of meta, though, you were just talking about playing against it, correct?
Yeah, but we might as well go with the meta first, because if you can't beat them, join them.
If you can't beat them, join them. That was my mindset. I actually started out trying to snipe, and to be completely honest, I was awful, am awful, will continue to be awful, with flashes of brilliance that won't ever be repeated, as you saw in that video I actually showed you guys on Slack last week. So I ended up switching over to shotguns right about at the end of House of Wolves, just before Taken King. Made the switch over to shotguns. And when you're using a shotgun, there are a few things you've got to keep in mind. One is this is still your special weapon. This is not your primary. You can't use a shotgun as a primary effectively. Not if it's in your special weapon slot. If you want to do that, you need to get the universal remote and then pick something that fills one of your range deficiencies. But when using a shotgun as your special weapon, there's a lot. Honestly, I think it's more difficult than using a sniper rifle. You have to account for a lot more. You've got to watch out. You got to watch out for really things you don't see as a sniper. You don't have to deal with grenades. Grenades are the bane of a shotgunner. You've got to watch out for getting baited. I know I do this myself, and I've had it done to me. People like to sit around a corner and, they know you have a shotgun, they're waiting for you. And as soon as they think you're rushing, they're backing off, they're jumping, they're getting out of your effective range. Hoping you turn that corner and you commit to a gunfight that you can't win.
I've definitely been on both the giving and receiving end of that a number of times. I think that's one of the first tactics that you learn as a shotgunner is both the bait and then to recognize when you're being baited is maybe the harder skill. Because it's very tempting when you see that bright red slice of pie. You want to go and get it, and boy, you're going to regret it if you've misjudged your opponent.
And I think one of the most common bait strategies that I use, something I learned from Halo, is the run up to the corner. A shotgunner is behind. Immediately backpedal, look straight down at the ground, throw a grenade. That doesn't work if you're using like a lightning grenade or a trip mine grenade, obviously. But for me, I use incendiaries, flashbang, suppressor grenades, any of the I forget what they're called, but the normal bouncing grenades. Look straight down, or skip grenades will actually work too. Now that I think about it,
they work great.
Smoke grenades will probably work too. You're literally making them think that you're going to charge around a corner. They start on their motion to intercept you. You backpedal and you leave a present for them basically on the ground. And it's the same movement every single time. Up to the corner, immediately backpedaling, looking at the ground, throw a grenade. I like to jump and give myself a little bit of a height advantage, especially if you're playing with a hand cannon, because you basically want them to come around the corner looking in a place where you're not. You want to give every advantage to yourself. You want them to be wounded. You want them to be confused. You want them to be disorganized. And you are trying to get them, like Cougar said, to commit to something that they can't win.
Yeah. And it's one of the easiest ways to get caught with your pants down. As a shotgunner, it's a very, very fast-paced game style. You've got to be taking in. You've got to understand both where your team and where your opponents are on the map. We were talking about Burning Shrine earlier. So the inside flag, C flag on Burning Shrine, that is really the perfect corner for an example. So this is the side of the map opposite of the outside flag, which would be A flag. If you're running from the C special, which is down by one of the doorways to outside, if you're running from that C special towards the C flag as a shotgunner, you've got someone sitting around that corner by the heavy ammo on the inside. If you try to turn that corner and take that guy out without being aware of the enemy positions, there is a straight line of sight on this map, in the back of the map, that looks directly across the inside heavy. If you try to take that corner and take someone out who's sitting around the corner, there very well could be a sniper sitting right there waiting for you, and you'll get your head blown off as soon as you turn that corner. Map awareness is a massive, massive tool for a shotgunner.
Yeah, I would definitely second that. Map awareness is one of the skills that I'm really working on in PvP right now, being more aware of where my enemies are, where they're going, where they're likely to go next. Using your radar to track that, and using not only your radar but also your lines of sight, tracking your enemy movements, paying attention to where your teammates are getting killed. These things are all pieces of information that are coming together to form a picture of what is happening on the map. And if you misjudge that information, then you're likely to do something foolish and get yourself surrounded, which is where you get killed by another shotgunner. It's one of those things, I think, where it can be fun sometimes to rush in and go nuts and maybe trade, maybe you even get lucky and get 2 kills before you go down. But whether or not that's helping your team is a little more questionable, especially when that's counterbalanced with times that you rush in and misjudge the situation and get yourself killed without taking anyone with you. So definitely, probably the most valuable skill for a shotgunner is learning to track where your enemies are so that you can avoid those bad situations.
And like we said before, aggression is a trait that's great to have, especially as a shotgunner, but patience is key. It's really, really necessary. And that doesn't mean camping. That's not what patient means. It just means being understanding of when you need to push, looking for windows of opportunity and not just running blindly into things. Speaking of running, one of the traits that I notice great shotgunners always have is exceptional movement ability. It's something I've noticed about some of the best players out there. It's something I've noticed about the shotgunners that I play against that provide me with the most trouble as someone trying to counter them, is just how well they move.
As far as movement goes, you need to be able to just flip the switch that makes you completely unpredictable. If you run into, say, somebody else with a shotgun or someone with the last word, you're going to have to be jinking, you're going to have to jump, you're going to have to do everything you can to close that gap without presenting a solid target to hit. Luminosity. Lumo. He runs a Night Stalker with a shotgun. He uses Shade Step in ways that you really shouldn't be able to use Shade Step. He's incredible with it. It's just, he uses that. He makes his movements unpredictable. He'll turn someone in a circle with Shade Step. And you've got to be able to do that. You know, a lot of times if you run into another shotgunner, you're going to trade. And a trade may not always be the worst thing, but it's never your ideal situation. Almost never. You've got to be able to cover ground. You know, you're using the shortest range weaponry in the game. And not every map has these nice little clustered lanes where you can drop from cover to cover and push up. You've got to understand when your time is to make that push, and you need to make that push quickly. Hesitation will get you killed. And that's another thing, it all loops back into awareness and decision making. You have to understand when you need to just make that ridiculous push over open ground. And if you hesitate for just a second too long, somebody regenerates their health, you're done for.
Those are some really excellent points there about knowing when your time to push is and then making that push and committing to it. That is so important with a shotgun, to commit when you make that action. Because if you start to move and then you hesitate, you realize, oh, maybe I miscalculated. What you're doing right there on your enemy screen is you're pausing. You're kind of waffling, going back and forth, and they're shooting you, and you're going to die. So you have to commit 100% when you make that push. If it maybe was a little bit mistimed, you're going to have to rely on your movement skills, try to juke, dodge, and stay alive. But the one thing that you don't want to do is waffle. You don't want to hesitate and stop and be like, oh crap, what do I do now? You have to have a plan going in. It's not playing passively, it's definitely playing very aggressively, but it's calculated aggression that is going to get kills. And I can definitely feel the difference when I'm going into a game fresh and energized and I'm kind of in that zone, versus when I'm playing maybe toward the end of the night and I'm tired, I'm not thinking as well. In both cases, I'm playing aggressively when I'm running a shotgun, but the decision making is so huge. It's not twitch reflexes. It's making the right decision about when to push and when to GTFO and find another lane.
You mentioned waffling, and that's probably the best way to put it. If you reach the point you realized I've hesitated, you just need to abort. You're not going to win. If you hesitate, you've already lost that engagement. It's time to reset. And one more thing on the movement. I got caught up monologuing, put out a bunch of platitudes. As far as your actual movement with a shotgun goes, you need to rely heavily on cover. If you're not in cover, you're in a scope. That's a rule of thumb that I follow. If I am not behind cover or vaulting into another cover, somebody is watching me and waiting to shoot me. That's the mindset that you should always have, because you've got to get close enough to kiss somebody to kill them, for the most part, with a shotgun.
Moving backwards for just a second, indecision is what gets you killed in this game. If you're going to play aggressive, play aggressive. If you're going to play passive, play passive. Just like Kutch said, it's when you're indecisive that you die. If you're halfway into a push and you're not sure if you should, that's a bad spot to be in. You don't ever want to be indecisive. You want to pick your strategy and you want to play your strategy. And the reason why is because the best players do things the quickest. There is no time for indecision. When you see a player who's very, very good, like Luminosity or like Sir Demetrius or any of these players out there who are very good, they make their decisions rapidly and they are, convinced that that is the decision to make. It is boom, 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 boom. They've moved here, 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 here. And there's not a second of, oh, wait, did I step forward? And then, nope, what am I supposed to be doing? Because by that point, it's already too late.
Speaking of, I actually had the pleasure of playing a match with Sir Demetrius last week. And you're spot on. The guy never, ever once stopped moving. He never stopped going from cover to cover. He never stopped pushing the other team. It was incredible to watch. There's a lot you can learn from a player like that. He was all over the place, and I think one of the biggest things with that style of play, because it's not just his play style. He was running a Titan, he was skating everywhere. But when you run that aggressive play style like that, your biggest asset is really confusion. You don't give the other team a chance to set up. You don't give them a chance to get lines of fire set right. You don't make sure that you've got all your doorways and all that covered, because there's always someone flying in at you trying to just absolutely ruin your day. And Sir Demetrius is an exemplar of that play style.
Yeah, you don't let the other team get organized. If you're faster than they are, they don't have time to prepare. They're having to react, and what you got to hope is that you're putting so much pressure on them that their reactions are wrong. You force them to make the wrong choices by doing things so quickly that they don't have time to think about what's right.
That's a fantastic point. On the technical side of this, just in terms of what people are doing, you mentioned Sir Demetrius there was running a Titan, he was skating. So obviously, when you're running a Titan, the movement style that you need to practice and excel at as a shotgunner is learning how to skate successfully and also learning how to change direction quickly while skating. There are a lot of different techniques out there. There are a lot of guides out there that I would recommend watching from players who are much better than me. And I don't know that we want to get into talking movement right now, since we just talked about it, I think last week or the week before. But I did just want to mention, you've got Titan skating as one fantastic option. Bones and Better Control is a very popular setup for hunters. It allows you to jump and then change the direction that you're moving 180 degrees. And if you've got Bones of Yao on, or Bones Jordan, as I like to call them, then you can actually do that twice in your jump, which is just a ton of fun when you get good at it.
Just to throw out there really quickly, Better Control is the best possible jump. Bones are a nice exotic, but as far as straight line movement, as a hunter, you are definitely better off sprinting. The Bones don't increase your forward speed. They don't increase your, well, I was going to say lateral speed, but they do a great job at, your change of direction. But as far as just your straight line speed, you are going to be better off with a sprint there. If you're trying to reach somebody that is on an elevated point from you, then the Bones are wonderful. They're the best exotic in the game. But as far as getting from point A to point B as quickly as possible, definitely just sprint if you're a hunter. You're making yourself too much of a target with the Bones, and you're actually slowing yourself down.
Okay, yeah, excellent tip there. That's something I'll have to take a look at in my own gameplay and see if I might be jumping a little bit too much. I tend to have a lot of fun trying to find bizarre angles to come over cover at using Bones, which is sometimes is really productive.
That is a wonderful use for the hunter jump in the Bones. Unpredictable angles when you come out of cover. It's not fun to play someone who does that.
One of the other tips that I learned, actually, really more from playing Warlocks, because I think they're probably the best at it. We talked about baiting with shotguns earlier, as well as how to counter a bait. One really great way to bait somebody into a room when you're playing with a shotgun is to jump and hover over the doorway, or hover at an angle just up into one side of the doorway, still within that one-hit kill range. But to the other person, it can look like you're moving away, which may give them an opportunity to enter the room. And they're going to have, of course, a very nasty surprise coming straight down at their head. That's something that I really enjoy doing. Do you guys have any other ideas? Do you do the same thing, or do you have any other suggestions or tips as far as using movement with shotguns?
One thing I like to do a lot, and I'm not a huge shotgun player. I've got my Hawksaw Party Crasher for when I go super, super competitive. I'm actually playing kids who it's required to break it out. But one thing I like to do a lot is when you get into cover on one side and someone else is on cover on the other side, people do this weird thing, especially people who aren't playing on a competitive monitor where everything is in one field of view, where they flick their eyes up to the radar. then they flick their eyes back to the center of the screen, and they flick their eyes up to the radar, and they flick their eyes back to the center of the screen. And there's a certain pace that most people do this at. They're not constantly looking at the radar. They may have it out of the corner of their eye. They may know there's some red, but they're checking their radar briefly, every fraction of a second. And what you can do is you can start to move in one direction. They'll start to react to that, take their eyes off the radar, you move in the other direction, and now you've got them in a predicament. They have chosen the wrong path because you're faster than they are. You've done something faster. Now you come around the other side. I can't tell you how many times I've either come over or around the side of cover to see a guy still looking in the direction that I feinted that I was going to go, and have them start reacting as I come around. But by that point, it's too late, because you can tell they flicked their eyes off the radar and they flicked their eyes back up and saw that I wasn't where they thought I was going to be. And it's called a feint. You pretend like you're going to go in one direction, you go in a different direction. And that is a strategy I use all the time when there's cover that has multiple angles around it, and especially when I'm facing other shotgunners. But you can use it, in things like, there are big feints and little feints, but things like Rift, where you start running with the spark in one direction and then you double back in another direction, and everybody reacts to that one side, and then by the time they figure out you're not there, it's too late. It works the same way with a shotgun, just on a much smaller scale. That's one of my personal favorite strategies. It's immensely satisfying to pull off correctly, to come around cover either over the top of it, around the back of it, around the front of it, and see the person who you were just going one-on-one against is looking in the wrong direction, and you just know that you tricked them, you know that you had them. So that's the thing that I like to do a lot when I play.
That is an excellent tip. I did not know about, I guess I probably knew, since I'm pretty sure that I do it, but I'd never really taken into account that someone is looking away from the center of the screen, that the other person is doing that. When I'm attempting to juke somebody out, I will sometimes try to feint one way or the other around cover, but I don't think that I'd ever really taken into account that timing. And that kind of information, I think, is good to know. It's really good because it does. That's something you can figure out for yourself how long it takes to do. So I'm really gonna have to pay attention to that too. I'm gonna be making some notes here.
Yeah, and that comes with experience. I mean, you'll understand how far do I need to run in one direction before the person will think that I'm committing in that direction, take their eyes off the radar, and I can go back the other. But that just comes with experience.
Yeah, that's excellent. Cougar, did you have something to add as well?
Not necessarily on that topic. I was just going to continue on with one or two more points about playing with the meta on shotguns.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
All right, so at the beginning I mentioned briefly grenades being the bane of a shotgunner. They're also the best friend of a shotgunner. Without a doubt, if you have your grenade up, and if not, if you can wait for it, you should. But if you've got your grenade up, you always lead your push with a grenade. You've got two goals with that. One is you want to damage your opponent, make it easier to kill them. I mean, that's the entire goal of the game. So, it goes obviously that you're going to keep with that theme, but the other goal is to push them out of whatever position they are currently waiting for you in. Anybody who's set up and waiting for your push is most likely going to have a pretty good chance of repelling it. You want to get your opponent out of position. You want to get him disoriented. You want to have him hurt so that he has to worry about not just your one-hit kill range, but the range period on your shotgun. And depending on what grenade type you use, you could suppress them so they can't move away as quickly as they'd like to. You can do massive amounts of damage with the lightning grenade or an Axion bolt. You can force them to run all the way across the map with the Axion bolt and the skip grenade. You can burn them with any of the solar grenades that have the burn effect so that you can see where they are the entire time, even if they're behind cover. But point blank period, you need to be throwing a grenade before you make a push. Without that grenade, you have a much, much higher chance of failing in the entire goal of a shotgun push, which is to get that kill and remain alive while you do it.
A soft target is an easy target. You always want to try to soften it up, and like you said, the defenders have the advantage. if you don't have a numbers advantage as an attacker, you have to assume that the defender has the better positioning. That's why he's defending. You don't defend points that are bad spots to hold. You defend points that are good. And, in a similar vein, as an aggressive shotgun player, you do need to be aware of areas of the map that aren't great, that you don't want to push into, that you don't want to be caught holding. There are spots like that. It is possible to push too far. It is possible to push yourself into a bad situation, and that comes back to calculated aggression. Don't push just because you see red on your radar. Those things don't make sense. I'm not necessarily the best voice to listen to on shotguns, but a lot of the easiest kills I get on shotgunners are when they're pushing into an area and I'm like, why are you pushing into this area? Like running into a sniper lane and trying to charge down a sniper lane. Like you said, you always have to think, if you're not behind cover, there's someone scoped in. I'm that person who scoped in on you. And when I see a shotgun out in a guy's hand as he rounds the corner on Waterfall Hall on Pantheon, it's like, what are you doing, man? That's not a good spot for you to be in. And they end up dead. And that's just something you got to stay aware of it.
Absolutely. We talked about this. There are places that a shotgunner needs to avoid, or they need to put their shotgun away. Obviously, challenging sniper lanes is foolish. Surprisingly enough, I see it happen a lot. Even up to 6, 7, 8 wins in trials, there are people that will try to take a sniper lane with a shotgun. Even if you're a Juggernaut Titan, which is hands down probably top 2 shotgun build in the game, you're still going to lose if you try to push that sniper, even with your Juggernaut shield, even skating full speed. It's a foolish move to make. And as a shotgunner, you've got to be the smartest person, the smartest player in that match to be successful. You don't have the advantage of a special weapon that can reach out and touch somebody at any range. You don't have a ridiculously high rate of fire to make up for inaccuracy. When you're shotgunning, you need to put yourself in a position where you can take one shot and be confident that it will be successful. Because most of the time, as a shotgunner, you only get one shot. You've got to position yourself to make sure that it counts.
So one thing that I wanted to add on this same note of challenging sniper lanes and maybe going into those areas where a shotgun is not always the best tool, especially if you don't know where the enemy is at, but you do know that they're probably not going to be within range immediately. One thing that we talked about in our PvP tips a couple of weeks back was movement, and that is so important to playing with the meta in shotguns. Sometimes there will be situations where you're going to make a push that is risky, and that's not always a bad thing, although, anytime you're taking a risk, of course, sometimes it's going to go badly. But one of the things that you have to do when you're trying to play a close-up strategy or an aggressive strategy is you have to be as smart as absolutely possible. Like Cougar said, you have to be the smartest guy on the map. So in order to do that, what you're going to do when you do round those corners into those potentially risky situations, maybe it's a shorter sniper lane. Maybe it's a lane where people are probably engaging in primary gun battles most of the time. You're not going to run around that corner. You're going to slide around that corner, or you're going to jump extremely high and go around that corner and look, to get a sense of where the room, how the room is situated, where everybody's at. And then you're going to get into cover as soon as humanly possible. You better have some solid map knowledge when you do make that decision to slide around the corner, to jump around the corner, so that you know that within 1 second you can be in cover, because somebody's going to be shooting at you, and hopefully they've not guessed where you're going to be. So that's the one thing that I would add to this, is when you do decide to make that decision, when you do decide to make that push that is dangerous, if somebody is just kind of camping, they're playing it extremely safe, and you decide that your teammates are just getting killed, you got to do something. Be as smart as you can about it. Get into that room safely, and then get into cover.
Let's get a short little summary going on here. So Cougar, if someone was to ask you, I want to start playing the shotgun meta, what are a few things, briefly, that you would say you should do, and what are a few things, briefly, that you should say you should not do? And then we'll transfer over.
All right. So, should do. The first thing would be you should always throw a grenade before you push with a shotgun. Should do. You should always be moving from cover to cover and avoiding staying in the open for too long. Should do. You should always be unpredictable when you're closing. Be it a slide, a jump, a shade step, blink, Twilight Garrison, whatever it is. Be unpredictable. Don't be where they are waiting for you to be. Shouldn't do. You shouldn't just blindly rush. You shouldn't rely on the mistakes of the other team. You should force the other team to make mistakes and then capitalize. Let's see. Let's go with another should do. You should always be aware of both where your team is and where you think the other team is, or in modes where you have radar or where they're on radar, be aware of where they definitely are. Shouldn't do. Don't rely on your abilities to get you through everything unscathed. Don't run a striker with Juggernaut and expect that Juggernaut shield to last for an entire push. That Juggernaut shield's only there to get you a quarter of a second, a half second or more. Shouldn't do. We're going to go to the shouldn't do. You should never hesitate. Never, ever, ever waffle back and forth trying to think, should I push, should I not push? Because you're probably getting shot the entire time. If you hesitate, just abort, fall back, reset. One more. That's right. There's one. This is probably the most important should not do. You shouldn't be a shotgun warrior. You shouldn't have that shotgun out 24/7. You definitely shouldn't pick the most direct path and run straight down that path hoping that you find somebody to kill along the way. You shouldn't push every single time you see a little bit of red around the corner. That's going to get you baited, and it's going to get you really destroyed. If you shotgun warrior, you're going to be able to get away with it one time, two at the most, before they are completely ready. So as far as the basic overview goes, that would be it.
And then what counters you the best? What do other people do that counters you the best when you're playing as a shotgun player?
People that understand how to bait a shotgunner, they'll usually get that over once, maybe twice, before you can develop a counter. And then really, once somebody has developed a counter and they've used it on you, it chains from there. So they'll develop the counter, you will counter that counter, and then they'll develop something. Maybe a Night Stalker will throw out a smoke grenade. That hurts a shotgunner. A smoke grenade takes away your best asset, which is speed. So Night Stalkers in particular are one of my least favorites to play against. Let's see. Passive teams are difficult. If you shotgun, passive teams are very, very difficult to play against. They're taking away one of your best weapons, which is aggressive shotgun play, simply due to the fact that you can't get close enough to play that aggressively. So passive teams are always a massive pain in the ass. Let's see. People who run good close-range counter weapons. The Last Word, Doctrine, sidearms. Sidearms are miserable, especially players who are good with them. I've actually run several Trials matches runs with a guy named Owa. He's I'd say either the very best or the second best player in the world when it comes to a sidearm. He's insane. And I've played against him a couple times. And a good player with a sidearm will dominate a shotgunner who's not prepared. See, sticky grenades. I call them trade nades because that's what they do. Usually the way it'll go is I'll turn the corner, I will slide, I will shotgun. that Warlock, Hunter, Titan, whatever is dead, I'll start running and then I'll explode and I'll go, what the hell just happened? Oh, he threw a trade nade. So those are a real problem, especially if you overextend. Speaking of which, if I ever overextend, I usually get punished. Overextending is very bad.
And can you clarify, when you say overextending, are you talking about pushing out too far on your own, or pushing out too far to the point where you're getting outnumbered by the enemy?
Both. Usually overextend will be used in the context of I've pushed too far forward without my teammates. If you do that, even when you trade, you lose. The other team's more likely to get there and set up before your team can. But then again, you can be moving in close formation with your team, and you can still overextend by pushing just slightly ahead of them and ending up surrounded on 3 sides by the other team, putting your teammate down 2-3 when they're going to immediately get pushed by those other 3 players now that they have the numbers advantage.
Yep, that's what I was thinking that you were kind of trying to communicate there. I just wanted to make sure that we were clarifying that for the listeners. One thing that, and this is just kind of some simple math to back up the real danger to your team if you are consistently overextending with a shotgun. If you go in and get a trade, you might think, oh, well, it's a trade, it's not the worst thing, right? I got some points, he got some points, no big deal. And it wouldn't be, except that if you have pushed too far forward, you probably didn't really trade. You probably killed him and got, your 100 points in Clash or whatever. But then you probably got team shot by at least 2 people, which means you gave them an assist and a kill, maybe 2 assists and a kill. So that math really starts to backfire if you are doing, exactly what you're talking about there, Cougar. If you're getting separated from your team or getting surrounded on 3 sides like you described, that can really turn what seems like a harmless trade into a scenario that, if repeated, is going to be punishing your team.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into another point about shotgunners. This is really a description of the shotgun playstyle overall. It's a very high risk, high reward playstyle. You are in the thick of the action, and you're using a gun that has very little to no range. You trade off for that is, it's an instant kill, and you have the capacity to kill as many players as your chamber holds. You can get 5 kills in a row with a shotgun if everybody's close enough to you to do it. But it's high risk in the fact that you can really, really hurt your team if you start shotgun warrioring. You're gonna give away those assist points, like you said. You're going to put your team in situations where they're playing 2-on-3 because you went out there and you said, I'm gonna kill this guy. You run up there, sure enough you kill him, you trade. Now they get that revive and you're playing 3-2. That's bad no matter what 3-game mode you're playing. So as a whole, I think shotgunning is that high risk, high reward sort of strategy. It's appropriate. I think they're in a pretty appropriate place for that play style.
And that's a solid segue. My part's going to be pretty short, honestly, because countering shotguns is simple. And Cougar already mentioned a lot of the things that you can do to take it away. I am the definition of the anti-meta player. I don't use shotguns almost ever. I'm always using snipers, fusion, sidearms. I find those playstyles to be more enjoyable, but the fact of the matter is it took me a long time and a lot of trial and error to figure out how I could run those playstyles and still be successful in a world where a lot of players are aggressively pushing with shotguns, and especially with skill-based matchmaking being the way it is, the players are good at aggressively pushing with shotguns. They're not just, foolhardily running around the map. It's not exactly the most difficult thing to take down a player who's bad with a shotgun who's just charging you blindly. All you have to do is be farther away than their shotgun can kill you at, and you'll probably kill them. And one of the ways that I know people probably don't want to hear, but try playing with a shotgun. Take note of the things like what I just asked Cougar. What is killing you the most? How are you failing? What is infuriating you when you're playing with a shotgun? Those things right there are the things you need to focus on if you want to be able to beat shotguns. So say you're getting killed by fusion rifles a lot, especially with fusions like Saladin's Vigil coming out now that are very, very strong. they're excellent for killing charging shotgunners. Like Cougar said, the last word is a great shotgun counter. I have a Soul Stealer's Claw with perfect balance and counterbalance that I can just absolutely melt people as they run towards me. Even the Clever Dragon, especially with the lower zoom scopes, it's not necessarily optimal for it, but it kills really, really fast. It has a very fast rate of fire. Someone's charging towards you, you can use these weapons to take down a shotgunner before they get into your range. But part of that is not putting yourself in a position where a shotgunner can get to you faster than you can kill them. If you are consistently walking into a hallway with your Mida out and a shotgunner is getting you, within a half second, maybe start thinking about not going into that area. There are areas in the game that are more conducive to shotgun battles and less conducive to someone going in with a longer range weapon. And if you're going into those areas, you're putting yourself willingly and knowingly at a disadvantage. Does that make sense?
That does. Actually, one of the very first things that I learned when I started playing multiplayer, player versus player games, I started with Call of Duty 4. And early on in playing Call of Duty 4, I ended up with a group of people that I would run with a lot. And, I was very new to the game. Ended up talking to this guy, playing several months on a team with this guy. And the very first thing that I learned from someone else was, if you get killed in a room and you go back to that room and you get killed again, you need to stop going to that room. There's no point. You are purposely putting yourself in a bad spot by doing that.
If you don't want to play with a shotgun, then don't play in shotgun areas. It just seems to make sense, but it's really difficult to do. It's so tempting to run to that area on your radar where there's a guy. You see a bunch of red, there's someone there with a shotgun, and you want to go kick his ass. But the reason why he's there with a shotgun is probably because he's got the advantage. Don't feed into that.
Yeah, 100%. I would definitely agree. And I think the suggestion, if you want to counter shotguns, to spend some time playing with shotguns and getting a sense for how they work is a really excellent one. One of the most important things that you can take away from that experience, if you can get a hold of a max impact shotgun with good range, even just picking up the Vendor Last Ditch, which is a pretty solid example of one of these shotguns. Not the best, but pretty solid. Get a sense of that range, that effective range for the one-hit kill. And then try to stay at least, 3 or 4 meters outside that range in-game at all times. Do not let someone get closer. If somebody else is pushing up to a corner, if you're not comfortable trying to bait that person, get away from that corner. Move off. Let them push around. Let them push you back. Because if you're not playing with a shotgun, you cannot be as aggressive. If you're playing with a sidearm, you need to be backpedaling. If you are playing with a fusion rifle, you need to be, in a lot of cases, backpedaling or sidestepping and tracking that aim. You can push with those weapons, but it needs to be well-timed, and you aren't going to go head-to-head around a corner with a shotgun. It's just not going to end well for you most of the time. Sniper rifles, of course, a totally different playstyle altogether. It's not quite in that same group. And I'm not going to try to address it because I am awful at sniping. But I think that really nails it. If you can get a sense for where someone can land the one-hit kill, then your ability with sidearms and fusion rifles to defeat shotgunners is going to increase dramatically, because you're going to know exactly how far away you have to be. And that, I think, is the only thing I would add there.
And the funniest thing about all the ways to beat shotgunners are almost the exact same as all the ways to be good as a shotgunner. Awareness, paying attention to where your teammates are, paying attention to where the enemies are, communicating, using grenades to soften targets. When you really, really look at it, it may be less movement-based because most of your movement will be baiting someone and then backpedaling away as opposed to aggressively charging after someone. But using grenades, it's just the opposite effect. A shotgunner wants to use a grenade before he comes around the corner to soften a target. You want to use the grenade before the shotgunner comes around the corner to soften him. You know, your communication with your teammates, if you're a sniper and your closest range weapon is a Clever Dragon, you're not in the optimal position to be taking out shotgunners. So if you know where a shotgunner is, tell your teammates. Don't you handle that shotgunner single-handedly. If you're playing on a team with all 3 snipers, and it's not a map like First Light, it's probably not a great composition for your team. Maybe one of you guys needs to change it up a little bit. If you're playing with Randy's, there's not too damn much you can do about it. You know, that's just unfortunate. And one of our suggestions a while back was you want to get better, play with people. It doesn't matter whether you find them on fire teams, the 100, LFG, as long as you're talking to them. Play with people you can organize with. An organized team, a coherent team, is a dangerous team. It's an effective team. You know, and besides using weapons that counter shotguns, which there are, as much as people want to complain that they're not, because they're not, the weapons that counter shotguns aren't necessarily always the best weapons in the grand scheme of the game. But if you're trying to counter shotguns, you got to take advantage of those. You got to take advantage of the map. You got to take advantage of having a team and talking with them. You got to be smarter than the shotgunner, basically. And I know it sounds like I'm saying, well, get good.
That's what it boils down to in the end, yeah.
That's the way this game works. If someone is using a powerful strategy, the way to beat that person is to be better than them. Be smarter than them. Be faster than them. Bait that person. Don't let them bait you. Make that person angry and make them start coming back to the sniper hallway that you're sitting in. Because they charge around that corner with a shotgun the first time. And this is a street that goes both ways. The same way you get killed by a shotgunner and you run back because you want to get your revenge, the same thing happens to that person. It takes a lot of discipline to avoid doing that. To say that person is in a better position than me and they killed me, I'm not going back that way. Shotgunners fall prey to it too. Take advantage of it. Put yourself in a position to succeed with the tools that you need to succeed. The strategies aren't as dissimilar as you think. You know, so I don't really have too much more to say about that. I mean, the way I've found to counter shotguns is to be smarter than them, to use weapons that beat shotguns on that forward charge, communicate. I think those are 3 really big things. And I know it's not the magic, you know, the magic lotto numbers that people were hoping for, like, oh, he's going to tell us how to just go out tomorrow and be better than shotgun players. That's not the way it works. Shotguns are the meta for a reason. They're powerful. I hope it helps, but that's basically what I've had for you. You heard what Cougar said. You heard what he said annoys him. You know the guns that are out there that can take down shotgunners, and you know what you have to do. It just takes the discipline and the awareness and the self-control, basically, to do it. Don't let the shotgunners get in your head. Get in their head.
We can give you the advice, we can give you the tools, but you've got to put it together for yourself.
Yep, absolutely.
That's what it comes down to in the end.
There are a bunch of ways to do it, and you just got to find which one works for you, and I think that's all that we can do right now.
And I think that's our like 75-minute mark, so we're probably done for this episode. Hell of an episode, guys. I like that one. I thought that was a good one.
Yeah, I was all over the place.
Yeah, hopefully the listeners enjoyed it as well. Let us know. I'm going to plug one thing because I'm, for the first time ever, trying to get Movie of the Week. I made a Ghost in the Shell trailer in Destiny, and I submitted it for acceptance into the Movie of the Week thing. And if you guys could go out and vote on that when it gets up, or check it out on my YouTube channel and share it, I'd be really appreciative of that. I put a lot of hard work into it. I'm not normally a person to make those type of things, but I just had a feeling that it'd be cool, and I think it turned out pretty well. So again, it's a Ghost in the Shell trailer remade in Destiny, and if you guys could check it out, I'd be much appreciative. I
gotta say, having seen the work that you did there, Mercules, that is just super impressive. What I would recommend that you do actually is not go watch it. I'd say go watch the Ghost in the Shell trailer and then watch that video, because it's going to be that much more impressive if it's fresh in your mind. Just the syncing and the shots that you managed to pull together, super impressive, man. You've got my vote for sure. I mean, you know, the fact that we work on this podcast together, I'm totally not biased in any way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe that. I want to think it was a good job that I did.
No, seriously though, it is really good. I retweeted it after I watched it, not before. So, I suggest it, definitely.
I appreciate that. Thank you. We got anything else? Anyone else doing anything cool that they want to talk to the viewers about?
I think that's enough stroking each other.